Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Yakkety Yak with James and Zach. I'm Zach.
And I'm James. Hello.
Hello. In our last episode, we talked about all the cards we think are going to be important in the new modern meta from the Batman set. And this time we're going to tackle all three team packs at once.
Wow. And we might also mention this time some things which are maybe not exactly meta-worthy, but are sort of fun for shenanigans.
Yeah, turns out there's not a huge amount of meta-worthy cards in the team packs. But there are definitely some that maybe you've forgotten about or that didn't even get quite of a look so much in the first place that we think will be pretty interesting.
I know that when I was reading through the abilities, it felt like I was reading them for the first time.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay, so we're kicking off with which pack are we doing? Doctor Strange, and the first one that attracted our attention is one that is sort of a known thing, which is Dormammu, Burning Ambition. While Dormammu is active, your opponents with 3 or more active characters may not use action dice. It was used quite successfully against me when I was playing Ultraman with Kryptonite. I didn't always have to have three characters, but it made life quite difficult. And in the new meta, action dice are perhaps going to be quite important. Team up, for example, you want to have a wide field, and then you want to use team up, and you suddenly find that if they've got Dormammu in the field, you can't. He's 6 cost, so obviously he's a bit of a stretch to get to, but he's got great stats as well and a nice die. I reckon he's all right.
Yeah, I think if you look at a lot of the control pieces they put out in Dice Masters, there's always like a contingency. It's your opponent can't do this unless they pay 1 or unless they pay 1 life. It's very rare to find a card like this where they just literally cannot do the thing. And that's pretty hard to get around at that point. All right. I'm going to try and make a case for Eye of Agamotto. Probably all of the Eye of Agamottos are like interesting abilities, but just a little bit too expensive. But I think the one that might be the most playable is Eye of Agamotto Reside Within the Amulet. First of all, the global, pay 1 generic energy. The first action die you buy this turn is put into your bag. So as a global, that's pretty good. If you're going to rely on globals, it's kind of like chalkboard, except it's right into your bag. You don't get the ramp from it, but maybe you just guarantee that you get team up next turn or something. That's pretty interesting already. And then Reside Within the Amulet, when used, place it on a basic action card. When you use that basic action, your character dice get +1 attack. People are talking a lot about the common Yanti Pureblood these days, where when you use an action, they're unblockable. So maybe you get a couple of Yanti Purebloods in the field, and then you use 1 action, and then all of them are unblockable, and they get +1 attack. Also, according to the wording on Mystical Conduit, where that one can stack, I would assume that this one also stacks. So if you could get a couple of them out, maybe you're using Malekith Global or I believe the Uncommon Cosmic Cube, which can reduce the purchase cost of actions. Maybe you get a couple of them on that action, and now you're getting multiple buffs for 1 die. I think that could be kind of interesting.
It's not a bad case, but I'll be impressed if I see it in the meta.
Yeah, me too.
I'm a little bit against it because the card art looks like an eye on a stick, which I'm not really that keen on. I know it's supposed to be Doctor Strange presumably holding the Eye of Agamotto, but it looks Anyway, moving on, we have, if I can find my cursor, Mindless Ones. There's what have we got? Yeah, this one. Dark Dimension. When fielded, Mindless Ones deal you 1 damage. It sounds a bit rubbish because that's obviously a negative ability for you, but in return for 2 fists, for the low price of 2 fists, you get attack stats of 3, 4, 4, and a total fielding cost of 1, which is not bad, I reckon. But you have to find some way of mitigating the damage that it's doing to you. And one way of doing that is using the Squirrel Girl. Is it Nutty Nanny? Is that the uncommon?
The uncommon Squirrel Girl, yeah.
And she's got a global which allows you to redirect 1 damage. You pay a fist and you can redirect 1 damage done by the character ability of one of your characters. I think that's how it is. So you could redirect the damage somewhere else so it doesn't hurt you. So then you get the benefits of the mindless one without the drawbacks. And I think Shadow Meld was using the 1 damage to actually knock out something. Yeah, he was using it to ping off opposing psychics and stuff. So if you get a couple of mindless ones in the field and you redirect the damage to ping their psychics off, and then get the mindless one attacking through for 3 or 4, which is pretty decent in fact.
Yeah, it could be a pretty interesting rush team there.
Yep.
I remember trying to make that work with Green Goliath. See if you could use the damage to trigger Green Goliath.
Right. Yep.
All right. Next up, we're going to talk about Scarlet Witch Hex Bolts. Obviously tricky to use this one because the other Scarlet Witch is so prevalent. And if you're worried about your opponent using action dice, then you kind of have to use the common Scarlet Witch from X-Men First Class. But if you can find space for this Scarlet Witch on your own action team, while Scarlet Witch is active, when you use an action die, you may pay 1 to add it to your prep area. This one is 1 more expensive than the super rare Mr. Miracle, but for that 1 energy, you guarantee that it goes to prep instead of having to kind of chance the 50-50. You could also maybe use super rare Malekith if you've pulled that, but I believe those go to your bag.
Yeah, that's right, I think.
And this goes to your prep area, so you get a little bit of ramp for your 1. I think if you're trying to cycle actions, things like improvised weapon or magic missile, stuff like that. I think that could be kind of interesting ability. Always kind of wanted to see it get played. It has exactly the same die and stats as the one from the X-Men First Class. So it can have pretty decent attack at level 3, and it always has 3 defense, which means they have to kind of do something to get rid of it. Also, this one isn't a villain, so it doesn't suffer from some of the other villain pieces.
Yeah, she's pretty good, I reckon.
Mm-hmm.
Onwards and upwards to the Wongs. There's a couple of good ones. The Wong for 2 is the one that I usually put on teams. He's 2 fists. He's an ally, and he's got fast, and he's got decent attack. He's got 2-3-4 in his attack, and 2-3-3 in defense, and his total fielding cost is 2. He's got a 0-1-1 fielding cost. Really not bad. Nice on an ally or a sidekick team, and that fast ability can be useful. You just sort of attack with him. And that damage is done before the blocker's damage is done. So if it exceeds their defense, then you're golden. I reckon. So
yeah,
I quite like him.
Yeah, and then the last one, the Faithful Servant. While Wong is active, your other sidekicks get +1/+1. Flying sidekicks is not a thing after Falcon rotated, but it's still nice having +1/+1. And the magic affiliation that he's got works pretty well with team up because there just aren't very many of them, and so you're likely to have only 1 magic affiliation in the field. It'll help for team up, and then you've also got an additional +1/+1 for all your sidekicks. I always like dealing with sidekicks and having them buffed and stuff. So
could be good. Could be good on a dark side ramping team to protect your sidekicks because your opponent might want to ping them out to stop you ramping. Yeah.
If you didn't actually get rigorous training to give them defense, maybe you can do it with
which in Europe we did not.
Yeah,
as far as I'm aware. What's the next team pack? Is it?
We got to move up to Defenders team pack.
Defenders. Okay, let's see if I can actually click the button. It's not having it. Hang on. Let's get rid of that, and then we'll have lost the cursor, and then we'll go back to Defender. Yeah, got it. Right, it took a while. Sorry. Who's up first? Oh, I wanted to mention Doctor Strange. Not a meta piece, frankly, at a cost of 7, but he's got lovely stats. And that's not the one I was after. Who is it?
Book of the Vishanti.
Oh, this. Oh, I'm struggling with my mouse. Apologies. Okay, there we go. Okay, yeah, he costs 7, so that's a lot. But he does have lovely stats. He's at 8/9 on his top side, and his abilities. While Doctor Strange is active, whenever you use a non-continuous action die, create a copy of its effect. You may choose new targets for the copy. So there's shenanigans to be had there. It's not going to be meta, but you can sort of multiply your action dice up and do silly things. Anyway, onto the real stuff.
Yeah, that's a free copy of the old super rare Lady Deadpool, but she's rotated. So, all right, Hellcats. I believe when Defenders came out, this was the card that everybody talked about. Was Hellcat Hell's Bell. When fielded, name a die, replacing all previous choices. Your opponent cannot purchase that die next turn. It's like we talked about with Dormammu. There aren't that many ways to just straight up deny your opponent from doing something, and this is a great way to do it. I remember looking into something like this for, Yanti pureblood teams. Maybe you could prevent them from buying that action. It's you kind of have to be thinking ahead in what your opponent is definitely going to want to buy, but being able to just straight up shut them down for a few turns could be pretty helpful. Her fielding cost is always 1, which is not ideal. And her defense is high enough that you're not going to get her KO'd, but that's where you could do something like Malekith Global or Fabricate to get her in the field, name a die, and then immediately KO her so that you can get her into prep and then do it again next turn. And then maybe you can deny them for a few turns in a row long enough that they've maybe been completely disrupted. And that's kind of the hope with that.
This was used to great effect against my Ultraman team again. Somebody was picking on my Kryptonite die and he kept fabricating it out. And once it's fabricated out, you can't blank it. There's nothing. It's just not there to do anything about it. It just says like you can't purchase that die, and she's gone. She's gone from the field. And how are you supposed to?
Yeah.
You simply can't. Also, might be good with a collector. You could collect her in for 1 mask. And mess with your opponent's mind. So she
great idea. Yeah.
Okay, who's next? I'm afraid we're going to skip over quite a lot of the Defenders pack because it's probably quite good for making a Defenders team if you've got one of those sort of affiliation evenings, but not that much that would be meta-worthy and not even that much for shenanigans from my point of view. So we're going to skip over the Hulks. I think we wanted to mention Iron Fist.
Pulling punches.
Yeah, he costs 5. Well, not sure I'd ever really use it, but when he attacks, deal 1 damage to each opposing sidekick. So it's a nice bit of clearance. And while Iron Fist is active, your opponent is dealt 1 damage for each sidekick KO'd by this effect. That's all right. It's not brilliant. Could be good. Okay, who's next?
If sidekick teams become a thing, that could be helpful. But also, if you maybe want to try and get your team up team to get through, there's another affiliation for you, and maybe you've cleared out enough of their defenders that you've got lethal now.
Yeah, true enough.
Possibly.
Okay.
Still a bit expensive though. Speaking of things that are just a bit expensive, we've got Jessica Jones Ladies Night. Jessica Jones gets +1/+1 whenever one of your character dice is targeted by a global or character ability. I think I missed that in my first read through. I think before rotation, there were quite a few ways to deal with one big character. I think back in the early days of Dice Masters, you could get one giant overcrushing or unblockable character and swing them through for lethal. But then with things like, there was always distraction, but there were things like Blink and Distraction, and then there was also Super Ronin. You could let it go through, or just let him go through. I think it was just too many ways to deal with just one thing. And we've lost a couple of those.
Uncommon Ronin as well. And there was nothing more depressing than having this massive character in the field, and they just let it through and knock Ronin out and go, I don't take any damage.
Yeah, I don't take any damage at all. And then it goes to the use pile, right? Yeah. So with things like that gone, you've still got Kate Bishop Global. There's still a couple ways to get around it, but I feel like maybe there's a way to do it. So Jessica Jones, you target her with something. Maybe you give her a puff, like a pump global. You give her +1 attack, and then she gets an additional +1/+1. If you can use mutation, you spin her up, spin something else down, and you've targeted 2 of your character dice, so she gets +2/+2. And maybe she gets some more stats if you spin her up, maybe. And if your opponent tries to target one of your characters with something, then she gets another +1/+1. Like James has said, probably not going to be a top tier team, but it's definitely a card worth looking at if you're trying to make something interesting for a local event or something.
Yeah, that's all right. Well, the rest of it, Lowkey, we're not gonna delve too far into Lowkey because he is the theme. Lowkey, not just this Lowkey, but all Lokeys are the theme for the April Team of the Month on Dice Masters North. So go and check out their competition. You need to build a team around Lowkey. And why Lowkey, I hear you ask? Because April 1st is April Fool's Day, and who better to represent that than Lowkey himself? God of trickery.
Yep.
So we will skip over that. And the last one was, maybe Luke Cage on a Defenders team. While Luke Cage is active, other Defender characters cost 1 less to purchase. When you field another Defender character die, draw a die from your bag and add it to your prep area. No, okay. Properly on a Defenders team, that's genuinely good. Outside of that, not so much. And the die looks a bit weird.
Yeah, I had to kind of look at that one from a couple angles to figure out what it is.
All right. So
all right, so moving on to the SpiderMan Maximum Carnage, the newest team pack, at least until Harley Quinn comes out. And right at the top there, we've got Black Cat keeping the Bloodhounds at bay. While Black Cat is active, your opponent cannot field level 3 character dice, keeping with our theme of cards and team packs that just straight up deny your opponent the ability to do something. This one or Black Cat Possessive, where if your opponent rolls a question mark, they have to re-roll it. I've definitely played against that and found it to be more annoying than I sort of imagined it would be.
Mm-hmm.
But being able to not field level 3 character dice, it means that they just have one fewer chance to get that character out, which is kind of interesting. And then also, and this has been talked about before, there is the super rare Triceratops from Tomb of Annihilation that if your opponent fields a level 1 character dice, you deal damage to it equal to your Triceratops attack. And there are very few level 1 characters that can survive a hit from a Triceratops. I think even Blob will get KO'd by a level 3 Triceratops' attack at level 1. So you've effectively made it so your opponent can only field level 2 character dice, and that might just make it so that their rolls go badly enough that they never get characters out in the field. And you can do that for the cost of 2 4-cost characters.
I played against a couple of teams like that, and they were quite oppressive actually. There's legs in them. Yoji played one, I think, and Dustin was another one.
And
they were all right.
Black Cat is a wall active ability with some decent defense stats, so
yeah, she's got
stay out for a bit.
She's got a chunky bottom. Anyway, on to Captain America. I think there's a couple of decent ones. Both of the ones, they've all got the global. Anyway, how about hand, son? Or how about a hand? Sorry, how about a hand, son? When fielded, sidekick character dice, you control game +2 attack. Pretty decent if you can get the timing right. As Zach had said before, if it wasn't when fielded, if it was just like a flying sidekicks, angel goblin thing, that would be great. But it could be useful if you can time it. And the global also is a bit weirdly expensive. It's pay 1 generic and 1 shield. Field target sidekick die from your use pile. Obviously, the new Professor X is better than that, but for those of us who don't have the new Professor X, that's all we've got left in the modern meta because Star Lab sadly has gone.
Yeah.
And the other one I think you wanted to mention,
Squad Leader. Right. When fielded, psychic character dice you control gain deadly until end of turn. If you happen to get a big field full of sidekicks, this is a way that you could just KO your opponent's entire field. Not a huge amount of ways to combo with that anymore. It'd be really nice if you could somehow then send them to used or something. But just being able to turn your puny little sidekicks into these deadly Hulk killers, I always think is kind of fun. Maybe they're forced to let them go through or lose their whole field, but with maybe Wong or Malekith out, then they're tough to let that many characters go through unblocked. So you could maybe make something out of that.
And there's a super rare cap from Guardians which gives them infiltrate as well, isn't it?
Yeah, but you can't run them at the same time.
Yeah. Oh, and probably you wouldn't want to run infiltrate and deadly. I don't know.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Anyway, on to Carnage. I don't know. Click. There you go. While Carnage, this is Carnage unfinished business. It costs 5. While he's active, your opponent must pay 2 more to use each global ability during your turn. So we've lost Oracle, or we will have lost Oracle come June the 1st. So I think this is the biggest tax for global abilities that there is. Obviously, he costs more. He costs 1 more than the global taxing Oracle. It has decent stats. The fielding is not too bad. It's 0-1-1, and he's 4-4, 5-5, 6-6. Is quite all right. You have to pay 2 generic more, which is quite something. But it is only during my turn. So if he's on my team, my opponent would have to pay 2 more to, for example, Kate Bishop away my fix it. I don't know if that's. I don't know if a 5-cost Carnage is going to be a deterrent for that, but it might find some use, I guess.
Yeah, it would actually be better if Heimdall could be used on your opponent's turn.
Right. Go on.
All right, so moving on to Doppelganger. I have featured Living Fractal on our channel before. Without White Tiger Global, that is an okay way of forcing your opponent to field sidekicks. And then I always have this dream that they're going to roll 4 sidekicks on their turn and then not being able to do anything because they immediately go to my side and then they have no energy left to spend, but has not actually happened yet. But when reading through this again to make this video, we found about the Doppelganger's 6 arms. When fielded, KO all opposing sidekick character dice and deal 1 damage to target opponent for each sidekick die KO'd this way. Not only is he 1 cheaper, which is pretty good, he's pretty easy to purchase, and he's a 2-4, 3-5, 4-6 with a total fielding cost of 2. But this ability has existed on a couple different cards, but I think all of the other versions of it have also KO'd your own sidekicks. You had Red Eyes Black Dragon, you had the Tsar Colossus, and then most recently we had the Ragnarok. Oh, I think Ragnarok you didn't have to KO your own
Yeah, you get
characters,
to
but that was a
choose.
7-cost character.
Yeah, 7
For
cost super
4,
rare. Yeah.
and it was a super, yeah. So for 4 and a common, I mean a team pack character, you can get rid of all of your opposing sidekicks and deal them a damage. Now you've either got a big open field to swing into, or you've just dealt them some direct damage. That seems like it might be something you could look into.
Another something you could collect her in. I'm just looking at everything and thinking, can I
Yeah,
collect?
no, I mean, I'm always forgetting all the things you can collect here, so it's good that you're thinking about it. Yeah, I mean, on your opponent's turn, maybe they're going to swing with a big field, and then the nice thing is it doesn't actually deal the opponent's sidekicks any damage, so it doesn't matter whether they've buffed them or they have rigorous training or anything out. Right. You just straight up KO them no matter what their stats are. So maybe they've got like a swinging through with an uncommon Malekith, buffed sidekicks team, but now all their sidekicks are gone on their turn. Wow, that could be pretty helpful.
That could be quite good because sidekicks are going to be, looks like they might be a bit meta these days. There's quite a lot of psychic action going on, so that could be really genuinely useful. Next, Iron Fist. Are we going on to Iron Fist?
I think not from this set.
No, it is exactly this one. Iron Fist Sensing.
Yeah.
When Iron Fist attacks, he gets +1 attack for each fist in your reserve pool. I'll thank Phil for this because he mentioned this in the Discord channel. It only costs 3. His fielding costs are, Iron Fist's fielding costs 0, 1, 2, so it's a bit tricky. But if you can get a load of fists in your reserve pool, maybe with some Batiri battle stacks, and you can get some Haymaker. Haymaker's still in, isn't it? Yeah, it's in the second turtle set. So if you can get some overcrushing Haymaker action, giving another +3 attack to your Iron Fist and Overcrush, you can get some nasty, meaty, overcrushing Iron Fists for the low price of 3 fists. So it is.
Yeah. No, that's all. The fists basically count for 2 then, because he gets the fist, and then once blockers are declared, you can use them to pump him again. Yeah. I could see that being a real big problem to deal with, and for half the cost to fix it.
Double use energy is always great, isn't it? It's like when we had the ring, we would use the masks for attacking with ring, and then using them to blink things back. Fist, using a fist twice has got to be a great thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Next up is this sort of relatively unknown card. I'm not sure that you've even read it recently. It's called Shriek. And obviously everyone has played Shriek Sonic Beam. I feel like last time we did Virtual Worlds, I went through all the teams, and I think there were like 3 teams that weren't using it. It's seen everything, and we've also been spoiled that the Nationals promos are going to include a promo for Shriek Dark Empathy, but Shriek being the only blanker left in Modern, we even got rid of all the action blankers and stuff. You can expect to see some Shriek Sonic Beam, but Shriek Dark Empathy, when fielded, ignore all text on opposing character cards. Being able to blank more than one thing. Your opponent's whole field at once, and because it still says ignore all text on opposing character cards, you get rid of the globals as well, so you can use that to get rid of Kate Bishop global, but also all of the other things that they've got going on. That might see some play nowadays with very few other blankers around.
Yep.
It is more expensive, but man, that was sort of the prismatic spray on legs, and not too bad. And the other Shriek, when she attacks, players may not activate global abilities. That's a pretty decent Kate Bishop global counter as well, because you can leave her in the field until you're ready to use her, unlike the other Shrieks, which have to be fielded. So maybe it's time to give some of those other Shrieks a look.
I know that Chris on the Ministry of Dice was mentioning the Dark Empathy, and he was, again, possibly collectoring in Shriek Dark Empathy. Pay a couple of, a bolt and another energy, and your opponent's entire field is blank.
Yeah, which, like, once again with Collector, you could do it on their turn before they attack. That could be pretty decent.
It could be quite upsetting. SpiderMan's next, isn't it? I think there's just really the War of the Heart. That's he's got a wall of text, but he was used to great effect by Ben. With Mary Jane, who's sadly left us. But while Spider-Man is attacking, your opponent must declare at least 1 blocker for each of your attacking psychic character dice before assigning blockers to your non-psychic character dice. When Spider-Man attacks, prevent all damage dealt to your sidekick character dice. So you get a load of sidekicks in the field, and you use those sidekicks to tie up your opponent's entire field and hopefully push through a dum dum or something brutal, and all your sidekicks survive because they take no damage. That's pretty
Yeah.
good.
Yeah, yes. Dum Dum was a perfect counterpart to this because he's not an ally, which in some ways is sad because you can't use Insect Plague Global on him or something. But with this, it's perfect because then they can't actually block him until they block all the sidekicks. And then the second part of this ability is just what makes it so brutal: the prevent all damage to your sidekicks. So your opponent is forced to block your sidekicks, and then they maybe can't block your giant Dum Dum, but then all of your sidekicks stay alive and they just come right back, and you can do it all over again. It's just so oppressive when it starts going, and only for a 4 cost. It almost feels like it's a little bit cheap for what it does. Yeah, that was a pretty decent combo.
Cool. And finally,
I might make a case for Venom Lethal Protector. Maybe I'm a little bit biased because Lethal Protector was the first comic book series I ever bought. But when fielded, take control of target villain character die until end of turn. We mentioned before that villains are pretty good these days. Lots of great villain control pieces. And as James keeps reminding me, the Collector continues to exist. If your opponent's playing the Collector and you can field a character that costs 1 less and then steal their Collector for a turn and use it, that seems like it could be kind of fun. Maybe you can take control of their Shriek. Maybe that prevents that Shriek from targeting your own characters for a turn. It just seems like there might be a way that you could use some of your opponent's good villains against them, especially if there are some non when fielded effects that you want to take advantage of.
I would certainly be very sad if somebody stole my Collector. I would not.
maybe you've saved energy to do your last Nobby, and then your Collector just gets stolen away from you at the last second.
Get off my Collector.
Serve you right on a Collector team.
Indeed, that's true. Okay, so that's that. Those were our picks. Not all of them meta worthy, but some. There's some fun stuff in those packs. I think my choice would be from those 3 packs. If I was going to buy one of them, it would be the Spider-Man one, the Max.
Oh, definitely.
Because there's really it was probably obvious, but there's quite a lot of stuff that we liked in that.
Yeah. Although I was finding as we looked through Doctor Strange, I was thinking like, oh, we'll mention the 2 or 3 good ones, but there were sort of a couple more ones that I wasn't really realizing. And probably not even necessary to get 2 copies of it. Although Mindless Ones as a 2 cost, you might want 4 dice for that one.
Yeah, right.
Maybe as singles. But yeah, the Defenders team pack, definitely the weakest of them. But still some interesting stuff to look around with, especially if you're not trying to plan for a super competitive WKO. But if you're looking for some interesting stuff to bring to your local store, there's some interesting stuff in there.
Yeah, all good. All right. So,
right, well, thanks everybody for watching. If you have any comments or suggestions of things that we missed, feel free to leave them in the comments below. And we hope you enjoyed, and we'll see you next time.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.